Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. The Foundation Cracks. Detective Ray Hutchinson had built his life on reading people's lies. 23 years on the force, 15 of those in homicide, had taught him that everyone had secrets. What he hadn't expected was to discover that his own family was no exception. The morning started like any other. Ray kissed his wife Linda goodbye as she prepared their 6-year-old daughter Emma for school. Linda worked as a pediatric nurse at Mercy General, a job that often kept her late into the evening. Ray admired her dedication, or so he thought. "Daddy, will you push me on the swings today?" Emma had asked, tugging at his badge. "When I get home, Princess, Daddy has to catch some bad guys first." That was 3 months ago, before the accident, before everything changed. Ray's background was blue-collar solid. Son of a steel worker, raised in Pittsburgh's rough neighborhoods where respect was earned through strength and loyalty was everything. His father, Big Mike Hutchinson, had taught him 2 fundamental rules: protect your family at all costs, and never let anyone make you look like a fool. Those lessons had served Ray well in his rise through the police force, earning him a reputation as someone you didn't cross. Linda came from money. Her father owned a chain of medical supply companies across the Midwest. When they met 12 years ago, Ray was investigating a break-in at one of her father's warehouses. She was 25, beautiful, and seemed genuinely interested in his stories about police work. They married within a year, and Emma arrived 2 years later. The first crack in Ray's perfect world came not from the playground accident, but from what he discovered afterward. The accident itself was straightforward, a tragic equipment failure. The swing set at Riverside Park had a manufacturing defect in the chain links. Emma had been swinging higher than usual when the chain snapped. The impact killed her instantly. Linda blamed herself. "I should have checked the equipment," she sobbed at the funeral. "I pushed her too hard. I should have known." Ray held her then, believing her grief was genuine. The neighborhood became too painful, so they moved across town to a modest house near the lake. Linda threw herself into work, often staying at the hospital until midnight. Ray understood. Grief made people cope in different ways. But Ray was a detective, and detectives notice patterns. Linda's grief seemed performed. She cried at appropriate moments, said the right things, but Ray caught micro-expressions that didn't match her words. 23 years of interrogating suspects had made him an expert at spotting deception. Then there were the phone calls. Late-night conversations in hushed tones. When Ray would enter the room, Linda would quickly end the calls, claiming it was work stuff or grief counseling. The breaking point came on Emma's birthday, what would have been her 7th. Ray suggested they visit her grave together. Linda refused, claiming she wasn't ready. Instead, she left for work early and didn't return until after midnight. Ray followed her. Linda didn't go to the hospital. Instead, she drove to the upscale Marriott downtown and took the elevator to the 8th floor. Ray waited in the parking garage, his service weapon feeling heavier than usual in its holster. She emerged 3 hours later, her hair disheveled, lipstick gone. Through his telephoto lens, Ray captured her straightening her clothes before getting into her car. The next day, Ray ran the hotel's registration records through his police database. Room 847 was registered to Dr. Timothy Volkov, head of pediatric surgery at Mercy General, Linda's direct supervisor. Ray had heard Linda mention Volkov before. Russian immigrant, brilliant surgeon, divorced twice, known for his charm with the nursing staff. What Linda never mentioned was that Volkov had been divorced twice for adultery. Ray's hands shook as he printed Volkov's photograph. The man was everything Ray wasn't: tall, cultured, wealthy. The kind of man who wore $1,000 suits and spoke 3 languages. That evening, Ray confronted Linda directly. "How long?" he asked, placing Volkov's photo on their kitchen table. Linda's face went white. For a moment, her mask slipped, and Ray saw something that chilled him. Not shame or remorse, but annoyance at being caught. "Ray, I can explain." "How long?" His voice was deadly quiet. 6 months, she whispered. Emma had been dead for only 3 months. The timeline hit Ray like a physical blow. Linda had been cheating on him while their daughter was still alive, while Emma was asking her daddy to push her on the swings. Did Emma know? Ray's question came out as a growl. Linda's silence was answer enough. Ray stood slowly, his cop instincts taking over. This wasn't just about adultery anymore. This was about betrayal on a level that cut to his core. "I want you out," he said. "Tonight." "Ray." Please, we can work through this. Get out. The roar came from somewhere primal, somewhere that remembered his father's lessons about respect and loyalty. Linda flinched, perhaps seeing for the first time the man she'd married. Not just a detective, but someone forged in Pittsburgh's steel mills and hardened by decades of dealing with society's worst. She packed a bag and left without another word. Ray sat alone in his kitchen, staring at Volkov's photograph. His daughter was dead. His wife was a stranger. And for the first time in his adult life, Detective Ray Hutchinson felt truly dangerous. The next morning, Ray began planning. Not just divorce proceedings or emotional healing, something far more comprehensive. He'd spent his career putting criminals away within the legal system. But this wasn't about justice anymore. This was personal. Ray opened a new file on his laptop and began typing. At the top of the page, he wrote two names, Linda Hutchinson and Dr. Timothy Volkov. Then he began documenting everything he knew about them, their routines, their weaknesses, their secrets. By the time he finished, Ray had the beginning of something that would make his targets wish they'd never heard of Emma Hutchinson. The foundation of Ray's old life had cracked beyond repair. Now it was time to build something new, something harder, colder, and infinitely more dangerous. Chapter 2. Ghosts and Revelations. Ray returned to Riverside Park for the first time since Emma's funeral on a gray October afternoon. The playground sat empty, yellow caution tape still wrapped around the swing set where his daughter died. The city had promised to replace the equipment, but bureaucracy moved slowly. He sat on a bench 20 yards away, watching the empty swings move slightly in the autumn breeze. The sound of creaking chains carried on the wind, metal grinding against metal in a rhythm that matched his heartbeat. This became his monthly ritual. While Linda thought he was working through his grief, Ray was actually conducting surveillance. The playground offered a perfect vantage point to observe the apartment complex across the street, where Dr. Timothy Volkov maintained a secret residence. Ray had discovered Volkov's second address through property records. The good doctor owned a penthouse downtown where he lived publicly, but he also kept a modest two-bedroom apartment under a shell company for his private consultations. On his third visit to the playground, Ray's surveillance paid off. Through his binoculars, he watched Linda enter Volkov's apartment building. She had a key. Ray was photographing their comings and goings when something impossible happened. "Daddy," the voice came from behind him, soft and familiar. Ray spun around, his heart hammering. The playground was empty. "Mom pushed me too hard." It was her. This time the voice seemed to come from the swing set itself. Ray approached slowly, his rational mind fighting against what he was hearing. The center swing, Emma's favorite, was moving more than the others, creating that distinctive creaking sound. As Ray got closer, he could swear he saw the impression of a small body in the rubber seat. "Emma," he whispered. The swing stopped moving instantly. Ray stood there for 10 minutes, waiting, but heard nothing more. He was a cop. He dealt in evidence and facts. Grief could play tricks on the mind. That's all this was. But as he walked back to his car, Ray couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching him. The next week brought a breakthrough in Ray's investigation, though not from any supernatural source. His partner at the precinct, Detective Luis Morales, mentioned something troubling during their coffee break. "You know that doctor your wife works for? Volkov." Ray's attention sharpened. "What about him?" "Internal Affairs got a complaint last month. Some nurse claimed he was using his position to coerce sexual favors. Said he threatened her job if she didn't comply." Ray kept his expression neutral. "What happened with the complaint?" "Disappeared. Word is Volkov has connections. His brother-in-law sits on the hospital board." The nurse transferred to another department and went quiet. That evening, Ray tracked down the nurse, Patricia Kim, 28, single mother of 2. He found her working the night shift at County General across town. Patricia was reluctant to talk at first, but Ray's badge and gentle persistence eventually opened her up. "Dr. Volkov isn't what people think he is," she said during her break. "He's charming in public, but behind closed doors, he's controlling, manipulative. He has this way of making you feel special, then using that against you." "How so?" "He'd arrange private meetings to discuss career advancement. Then he'd make it clear that advancement required cooperation. When I refused, suddenly I was getting written up for minor infractions. My schedule got changed to the worst shifts. He was systematically making my life hell." "Why didn't you pursue the complaint?" Patricia laughed bitterly. "You don't fight the golden boy. Volkov brings in millions in surgical revenue. The hospital protects him. I just want it out. What about other nurses? Did he target anyone else? Patricia hesitated, then nodded. Linda Hutchinson. But with her, it was different. She seemed willing, almost eager. They'd have these long conversations in his office with the door closed. Other nurses started talking. Ray felt something cold settle in his stomach. What kind of talking? That maybe Linda was getting special treatment because she was sleeping with him. Better shifts, recommendations for training programs. Some people thought she was using the relationship to advance her career. Ray thanked Patricia and left, his mind racing. This added a new dimension to Linda's betrayal. It wasn't just about emotional connection or physical attraction. It was transactional. The next day, Ray did something that crossed every ethical line in his career. He used police resources to investigate his wife and her lover. DMV records showed Linda had been making regular trips to Volkov's apartment for 8 months, 2 months before Emma died. Hotel receipts showed they'd been meeting at various locations across the city for even longer. But the most damning evidence came from Linda's phone records. Ray pulled them using his police credentials, claiming they were part of an ongoing investigation. The night Emma died, while Ray was at the morgue identifying his daughter's body, Linda had sent 17 text messages to Volkov. Ray couldn't access the content without a warrant he'd never get, but the timing was damning. His daughter's body was still warm, and Linda was texting her lover. Ray's investigation was interrupted by another visit to the playground. This time, he wasn't alone. "You come here often, Detective Hutchinson?" Ray spun to find a man in his 50s watching him from the playground entrance. Tall, thin, wearing an expensive coat that didn't match the neighborhood. "Do I know you?" Ray's hand instinctively moved toward his weapon. "Dr. Timothy Volkov. I believe you know my friend." Ray studied Volkov up close for the first time. The man was handsome in a classical way, but there was something cold in his eyes. Calculating. "Your friend is my wife," Ray said evenly. "Soon-to-be ex-wife, from what I understand. Linda told me you asked her to leave." The casual way Volkov said it, as if discussing the weather, made Ray's blood pressure spike. "What do you want, doctor?" To make something clear, Linda's divorce proceedings could go smoothly, or they could get complicated. "I have considerable influence in this city. Hospital board members, city council connections, even some judges owe me favors." Ray took a step closer. "Are you threatening me?" "I'm offering you a reality check. You're a public servant making $60,000 a year. I'm a surgeon who brings in millions annually. Linda has chosen to upgrade her circumstances. The smart play is to make this easy on everyone." Ray looked around the empty playground, then back at Volkov. "You know what I do for a living, doctor? Arrest petty criminals. Investigate domestic disputes. Nothing that concerns me. I investigate murders. I spend my days figuring out how people kill each other and why. I'm very good at understanding what makes people disappear." For the first time, Volkov's confidence wavered slightly. "Are you threatening me, detective?" Ray smiled, a cold expression that had terrified suspects for 2 decades. "I'm offering you a reality check. My daughter died 3 months ago. My wife betrayed me with a man who uses his position to prey on vulnerable women. I've got nothing left to lose, and I'm very good at solving problems." Volkov backed toward his car. "I'll be filing a complaint with your department about this conversation." "You do that. Make sure you mention that you sought out a grieving father at his daughter's death site to threaten him over a divorce. I'm sure that'll play well." After Volkov left, Ray sat back on his bench. The confrontation had clarified something important. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. Volkov was a predator who'd been using his position for years, and Linda had become complicit in that system. As the sun set over the playground, Ray heard the chains creaking again. "Daddy, don't let them win." This time, Ray didn't turn around. Instead, he pulled out his phone and made a call. "Luis? It's Ray. I need you to do me a favor. Run a deep background check on someone for me. Dr. Timothy Volkov at Mercy General. I want everything. Employment history, criminal background, civil suits, everything." "Ray, you know I can't. My daughter is dead, Luis. My wife is cheating with this guy, and he just threatened me. I need to know what I'm dealing with." There was a long pause. "I'll see what I can find." Ray hung up and looked back at the swing set. The chains had stopped moving, but he could swear he felt Emma's presence. "Don't worry, princess," he whispered. "Daddy's going to make sure the bad people pay." For the first time since Emma's death, Ray felt something like peace. Not the kind that came from healing or forgiveness, the kind that came from having a clear mission. Linda and Volkov had made a mistake. They'd assumed Ray was just another grieving husband who'd accept his fate quietly. They'd underestimated what 23 years of police work had taught him about human nature, leverage, and the art of systematic destruction. Ray stood up from the bench and walked toward his car. He had work to do. Chapter 3: The Surgeon's Secrets. Luis Morales delivered the background report on Dr. Timothy Volkov 3 days later, and it painted a picture that made Ray's blood run cold. They met at Mickey's Diner, an all-night place near the precinct where cops went to discuss things that couldn't be discussed officially. "This guy's got a pattern," Luis said, sliding a thick folder across the table. "Going back 15 years, everywhere Volkov has worked, there have been complaints. Sexual harassment, abuse of power, coercion. But nothing ever sticks." Ray opened the folder. The first document was a police report from Chicago, filed 8 years ago by a surgical resident named Dr. Angela Foster. Foster claimed Volkov cornered her in a supply closet and assaulted her, Luis continued. When she reported it, suddenly her surgical evaluations went south. She got bounced from the program. What happened to the complaint? Hospital claimed insufficient evidence. Foster's credibility got destroyed. They claimed she had a history of emotional instability and was making false accusations to cover her poor performance. Ray flipped through more documents. Portland, Oregon, a nurse named Jennifer Walsh. Similar complaint, similar outcome. Denver, Colorado, Dr. Patricia Gonzalez, another resident. The pattern was consistent and damning. How does he keep getting away with it? Ray asked. 2 things. First, he's brilliant. The guy saves kids' lives, brings in massive revenue for whatever hospital employs him. Second, he's smart about choosing victims. Young women who are financially dependent on the job, who have something to lose. What about his personal life? Luis pointed to another section of the file. 2 divorces, both ugly. First wife, Susan Volkov, claimed domestic abuse but recanted her statement before trial. Divorced in 2018. Second wife, Maria Volkov, divorced him last year. Her attorney claimed irreconcilable differences, but I found the original filing before it was amended. Ray read the original divorce petition. Maria Volkov had accused her husband of emotional abuse, financial control, and systematic intimidation. Like the first wife, she'd withdrawn the allegations. Both ex-wives received substantial settlements with ironclad NDAs, Luis added. Whatever Volkov did to them, he paid well to keep them quiet. Ray studied Volkov's photograph, clipped to the file. The man looked confident, successful, untouchable. But Ray had learned something important from his years in homicide. Everyone had a weakness. Everyone made mistakes. "There's something else," Luis said quietly. "Unofficial stuff." A contact at the DEA mentioned Volkov's name in connection with prescription fraud. Apparently, he's been writing scripts for high-end painkillers that don't match his patient records. Any evidence? Not enough for charges, but enough to make them interested. If someone could provide additional evidence. Ray understood. Luis was offering him a path to destroy Volkov legally. But Ray was thinking beyond legal consequences now. That afternoon, Ray drove to Mercy General Hospital and observed Volkov's routine. The doctor was scheduled for surgery from 2 p.m. to 6 p.m., which gave Ray time to explore. Using his badge to gain access, Ray located Volkov's office on the 4th floor. The door was locked, but Ray had learned lock-picking skills during his early years in narcotics. The skill came back quickly. Volkov's office was meticulously organized. Expensive furniture, medical journals, photographs of him receiving awards. Ray photographed everything, but focused on the computer and filing cabinets. The computer was password protected, but Ray found something better. Hidden in a false bottom of Volkov's desk drawer was a small notebook filled with handwritten entries. It appeared to be a personal log of some kind. Ray photographed each page. The entries were coded, but patterns emerged. Dates, initials, and what appeared to be payment amounts. Cross-referencing with his hospital schedule, Ray realized Volkov was documenting something systematic. One entry caught Ray's attention. LH, responsive to pressure. Husband cop, but distracted by grief. Useful for long-term arrangement. LH Linda Hutchinson. Ray's hands shook as he read further. Volkov had been documenting his relationship with Linda like a clinical case study. Her emotional state, her vulnerabilities, her willingness to participate in his arrangements. Another entry, dated 2 weeks after Emma's death. LH guilt complex perfect leverage. Believes she caused accident. Will do anything to maintain relationship as penance. Ray understood now. Volkov wasn't just sleeping with Linda. He was psychologically manipulating her, using Emma's death as emotional leverage. The notebook contained similar entries about other women. Patricia Kim was listed as PK, single mother, financial desperation, terminated for noncompliance. Jennifer Walsh from Portland was JW, ambitious but naive, useful until she became demanding. Ray was photographing the last pages when he heard voices in the hallway. He quickly replaced the notebook and slipped out through the office's connecting door to an examination room. Dr. Volkov was returning early from surgery. Ray waited in the examination room, listening to Volkov make phone calls. One conversation was particularly revealing. "No, the detective is becoming a problem," Volkov was saying. "He's been asking questions, making threats. We need to accelerate the timeline." A pause. Then, "Linda's divorce papers are ready. Once they're filed, she'll be financially dependent on me completely. After that, the detective becomes irrelevant." Another pause. "Trust me, I've handled difficult husbands before. Ray Hutchinson is just another grieving widower who'll drink himself into irrelevance once reality sets in." Ray left the hospital with 2 critical pieces of information. First, Volkov had been systematically documenting his psychological manipulation of multiple women. Second, he was actively planning to neutralize Ray as a threat. That evening, Ray made a decision that would have horrified his younger self. He was going to fight fire with fire. Ray drove to Linda's new apartment, a luxury complex downtown that she could never afford on a nurse's salary. Volkov was obviously paying her rent. Linda answered the door in a silk robe that probably cost more than Ray's monthly salary. "Ray, what are you doing here? We need to talk." "I don't think that's a good idea. Tim said you might try to." "Tim?" Ray stepped into the apartment without invitation. "You're calling him Tim now." The apartment was expensively furnished. Ray recognized Volkov's taste from his office. Everything precise, controlled, designed to impress. "Ray, please leave. I'll call security if I have to." "Go ahead. I'd love to explain to building security why my wife is living in an apartment that costs 3 times her annual salary." Linda's composure cracked slightly. "Tim is helping me through a difficult time. Tim is a predator who's been using his position to coerce women for 15 years. You're just his latest victim." "That's not true. Tim loves me. He's going to marry me after our divorce is final." Ray almost laughed. "Has he shown you his notebook? The one where he documents your guilt complex and how useful it is for manipulation?" Linda's face went white. "You're lying." Ray pulled out his phone and showed her the photographs of Volkov's notebook entries. Linda read them in silence, her expression changing from defiance to confusion to horror. He wrote this about me? About you and at least 6 other women. You're not special, Linda. You're just another entry in his research project." Linda sat down heavily on the expensive couch. "But he said he'd never felt this way before. That we were meant to be together. He also said the same thing to his 2 ex-wives before he paid them off to keep quiet about his abuse." Ray could see Linda's world crumbling. Part of him felt satisfaction. Part of him felt pity. But mostly, he felt cold determination. "Here's what's going to happen," Ray said. "You're going to help me destroy him." "Ray, I can't. Emma is dead because you were too busy screwing your boss to pay attention to playground safety. You owe me this." The accusation hit Linda like a physical blow. Ray had never blamed her directly for Emma's death before, but now the words hung in the air like poison. "That's not fair," Linda whispered. "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Our daughter is dead, and you were texting your lover from the morgue. You want to make this right? Help me make sure Volkov never hurts anyone else." Ray left Linda with copies of the notebook photographs and a choice: cooperate with his plan or face the consequences alone. As he drove home, Ray felt something he hadn't experienced since Emma's death, a sense of purpose. Volkov had made one critical mistake. He'd assumed Ray was just another obstacle to be managed. But Ray wasn't just a grieving husband anymore. He was a man with nothing left to lose and 23 years of experience hunting predators. The hunt had officially begun. Chapter 4, The Web Titans. Ray's phone buzzed at 2:47 a.m. The caller ID showed Linda's number. He knows you were in his office, she said without preamble. Her voice was shaking. Ray sat up in bed, instantly alert. How? Security cameras in the hallway. He saw you leaving. Ray, he's not the man I thought he was. What happened? He came here tonight. Not the charming Tim from the hospital. Someone else. He was cold, calculating. He knows I saw the notebook photos. Ray could hear Linda crying. Despite everything she'd done, he felt a flicker of protective instinct. Where are you now? Locked in the bathroom. He left, but he said I belonged to him now. That I'd made choices that couldn't be undone. Pack a bag. I'm coming to get you. Ray, I can't ask you to. You're not asking. I'm telling you. Whatever else has happened between us, you don't deserve whatever Volkov has planned. Ray arrived at Linda's apartment building to find her waiting in the lobby with a single suitcase. She looked terrified, makeup smeared, designer clothes wrinkled, hands shaking. He took my keys, she said as Ray led her to his car. He said I wouldn't be needing my own transportation anymore. What else did he say? That he'd invested too much in me to let me walk away. That he had insurance to make sure I stayed cooperative. Ray drove Linda to a safe house he sometimes used for witnesses, a small apartment the department maintained off the books. As they drove, Linda began talking, and what she revealed made Ray's blood boil. The notebook isn't the worst part, she said. He's been recording everything. Our conversations, our intimate moments. He showed me videos tonight, said they were his insurance policy. Against what? Against me leaving. Against me talking. He said if I ever tried to expose him, the videos would be sent to the hospital board, to Emma's school, to your precinct. He'd destroy my reputation and make sure everyone knew what kind of mother Emma had. Ray pulled over and turned to face Linda. Emma's school? Why would he? Linda started crying again. Because Emma saw us once. At the hospital. She came with me to pick up my paycheck, and she saw Tim kissing me in his office. She asked me why Mommy was kissing the doctor when she was married to Daddy. The revelation hit Ray like a sledgehammer. His daughter had known about the affair, had died knowing her mother was betraying her father. What did you tell her? I told her it was our secret, that it would hurt Daddy if he found out, so she couldn't tell anyone. Ray gripped the steering wheel so hard his knuckles went white. Emma had carried that burden to her grave. His innocent daughter had died protecting her mother's lies. Ray, please say something. When Ray finally spoke, his voice was deadly quiet. You made our daughter complicit in your betrayal. I know it was wrong. I was confused. I thought I loved him. Stop talking. Ray started the car and drove the rest of the way in silence. At the safe house, Ray helped Linda get settled, then made a series of phone calls. First to Luis, asking him to expedite the DEA investigation into Volkov's prescription practices. Second to Patricia Kim, the nurse who'd transferred to County General. I need to ask you something, Ray told Patricia when she answered. Did Volkov ever record your interactions with him? There was a long pause. How did you know? He's escalating. My wife, my soon-to-be ex-wife, is his latest victim. He showed me videos during our last meeting. Said he had hours of footage from his office, from hotel rooms. That's when I knew I had to get out. No one would believe me over him, especially not with that kind of leverage. Ray thanked Patricia and hung up. Then he made one more call, to a contact he hadn't spoken to in 5 years. Bobby Chin ran a private investigation firm that specialized in corporate espionage and digital security. Bobby operated in gray areas that police couldn't touch. Ray Hutchinson, Bobby said when he answered. Thought you'd gone completely legitimate. I need a favor, Bobby. Big one. What kind of favor? The kind that requires discretion and selective blindness about methods. They met the next morning at a coffee shop downtown. Bobby looked the same, mid-40s, thin, dressed like an accountant, but with eyes that missed nothing. Tell me about the target, Bobby said. Ray explained about Volkov, the recordings, the pattern of abuse. Bobby listened without taking notes. He had the kind of memory that made him valuable and dangerous. You want me to hack him, Bobby said. It wasn't a question. I want you to find his insurance policies and make them public. This guy has been destroying women's lives for 15 years. It's time someone returned the favor. What's your budget? Whatever it takes. Bobby smiled. I like your wife's situation has motivated you to explore alternative justice. My wife is part of the problem, but she's also the key to solving it. How so? Ray pulled out his phone and showed Bobby a text message Linda had sent him that morning. Tim wants to meet tonight. Says he has a proposal that will solve everyone's problems. I'm scared. She's going to wear a wire, Ray said. Get him talking. Get him to incriminate himself. And if he discovers the wire? Ray's expression hardened. Then we move to plan B. Which is, you don't want to know. That afternoon, Ray returned to the playground where Emma had died. He needed to think, to plan, to prepare for what was coming. As he sat on his usual bench, the familiar sound of creaking chains filled the air. Daddy, they hurt me too. Ray looked up at the swing set. The center swing was moving again, but this time Ray could see more than just an impression. For just a moment, he could swear he saw Emma sitting there, 6 years old, blonde pigtails, wearing the pink dress she'd been buried in. Emma, Mommy's scared, Daddy. The bad man wants to hurt her like he hurt the other ladies. Ray blinked, and the vision was gone. The swing was empty, moving slightly in the breeze. But Emma's words echoed in his mind. Despite everything Linda had done, she was still Emma's mother. And if Emma wanted her mother protected, Ray would make sure that happened, even if it meant destroying himself in the process. That evening, Ray fitted Linda with a micro-recorder borrowed from the narcotics division. The device was barely larger than a button and nearly undetectable when sewn into clothing. What if he finds it? Linda asked. He won't. But if something goes wrong, if you feel threatened, you say the code word, Pittsburgh, and I'll come in. Where will you be? Close enough. Ray had positioned himself in Volkov's apartment building, using his police credentials to convince building security to let him monitor the situation. Through his earpiece, he could hear everything happening in Volkov's apartment. The conversation started cordially enough. Volkov offered Linda wine, asked about her day, played the charming lover. But gradually, his tone changed. You've been talking to your husband, Volkov said. I'm disappointed, Linda. I haven't told him anything important, Linda replied. Her voice was steady, but Ray could hear the fear underneath. You showed him my private notes. That was a violation of trust. Tim, those notes, they made me sound like a case study. Because that's what you are. What you all are. Do you think this is about love, Linda? About romance. This is about power, control, getting what I want when I want it. Ray gritted his teeth, listening to Volkov's mask slip completely. You belong to me now, Volkov continued. Your divorce will be finalized next week. Your husband will pay alimony, but not enough to maintain your current lifestyle. You'll be dependent on me for everything. Housing, clothes, spending money. In exchange, you'll be available whenever I need you. What if I refuse? Volkov laughed. Then everyone sees the videos. Your husband's colleagues, Emma's teachers, your parents. Everyone will know what kind of woman you really are. Ray heard Linda start to cry. But it's not just about embarrassment, Volkov said. I have friends in family court. If Ray ever tries to remarry, if he ever has more children, I can make sure everyone knows his first wife was an unfaithful whore who contributed to her daughter's death through neglect. Ray's hands clenched into fists. Volkov was threatening not just Linda, but Ray's entire future. You see, Linda, I don't just collect women. I collect leverage. Your husband thinks he's hunting me, but he's already lost. He just doesn't know it yet. Through his earpiece, Ray heard Linda whisper something that chilled him. Pittsburgh. Ray was moving before she finished the word. He took the stairs 3 at a time, his service weapon drawn. Using his master key from building security, Ray entered Volkov's apartment to find Linda backed against a wall, Volkov standing over her with something in his hand. Step away from her, Ray commanded. Volkov turned, smiling. Detective Hutchinson. Right on schedule. I said step away. Or what? You'll shoot me? In my own apartment? While I'm having a civilized conversation with my girlfriend, Ray noticed the syringe in Volkov's hand. What's in the needle, doctor? Just a mild sedative. Linda was becoming hysterical. I was trying to help her calm down. Ray knew better. Volkov had been planning to drug Linda, probably to assault her while she was unconscious. The recording would have shown her entering willingly, but not what happened after. Drop the syringe. I don't think so. Volkov's smile widened. You see, detective, you're not the only one who's been planning. While you were playing amateur detective, I was arranging for your professional destruction. Volkov gestured toward his laptop, which was open on the kitchen counter. Right now, Internal Affairs is receiving an anonymous tip about a rogue detective who's been using police resources to stalk and harass a respected surgeon, complete with doctored evidence of you breaking into my office, threatening me at the playground, and using your badge to intimidate witnesses. Ray felt cold dread settle in his stomach, but kept his weapon trained on Volkov. The best part, Volkov continued, is that your own partner provided some of the evidence. Luis Morales has been very helpful, though he doesn't know it. Those background checks he ran for you, all documented. Your use of police databases to investigate my personal life, all logged. Ray's mind raced. Volkov was right. Ray had crossed numerous ethical and legal lines in his investigation. If presented correctly, his actions could be painted as stalking and harassment. By tomorrow morning, you'll be suspended pending investigation, Volkov said. By next week, you'll be facing criminal charges for abuse of power. Your pension, your reputation, your future, all gone. You're forgetting something, Doctor, Ray said quietly. We recorded this entire conversation, including your admission that you've been systematically abusing women for years. Volkov's smile faltered for just a moment. Recorded without my consent, in my private residence. Inadmissible in court, and it'll only reinforce the narrative that you're a rogue cop who's lost his mind with grief. Ray realized Volkov was right again. The recording wouldn't hold up legally, especially given the circumstances under which it was obtained. But Ray wasn't thinking about legal proceedings anymore. Linda, go wait in the hallway, Ray said, not taking his eyes off Volkov. Ray, don't do anything stupid, Linda whispered. Go. Now. Linda hesitated, then slipped out of the apartment. Ray heard the door click shut behind her. So what now, detective? Volkov asked. Are you going to shoot me? Because that would solve all my problems. A grieving widower snaps and murders his wife's lover. The media will eat it up. Ray looked around the apartment, at the expensive furniture, the medical diplomas on the walls, the photographs of Volkov receiving awards and accolades. This man had built an entire life on the systematic destruction of vulnerable women, and the system had protected him every step of the way. You know what the difference is between you and me, Doctor? Ray asked. Aside from about $2 million in annual income, you think you're untouchable. But I've spent 23 years learning that everyone breaks eventually. Ray holstered his weapon. Volkov looked confused. What are you doing? Walking away. For now. That's it. That's your big confrontation? I expected more from Pittsburgh Steel. Ray paused at the door. You made one mistake tonight, Doctor. You threatened my future, my ability to have a family again, to rebuild my life. That crosses a line you can't uncross. Are you threatening me? I'm making you a promise. You destroyed my daughter's innocence. You corrupted my wife. You've hurt women for 15 years and gotten away with it. But your luck just ran out. Ray opened the door. Enjoy your apartment, Doctor. And your freedom. Both are temporary. As Ray left the building with Linda, she was crying again. I'm sorry, she kept saying. I'm so sorry about everything. Ray didn't respond. His mind was already moving to the next phase of his plan. Volkov had played his cards well, but he'd also revealed critical information. Ray now knew the scope of Volkov's counterattack, which meant he could prepare for it. More importantly, Ray had confirmed something crucial. Volkov was a predator who felt completely protected by his position and wealth. That kind of arrogance made men careless. And careless men made mistakes. Chapter 5. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. Ray's suspension came exactly as Volkov had predicted. Internal Affairs served him with papers at 6 a.m. the next morning, citing abuse of police resources, stalking, and conduct unbecoming an officer. He was ordered to surrender his badge and service weapon pending a full investigation. Captain Morrison, Ray's commanding officer for 8 years, delivered the news personally. Ray, what the hell were you thinking? Morrison asked as Ray cleaned out his desk. I was thinking that sometimes the system fails, and good cops have to step outside the lines. Good cops don't break into doctors' offices and threaten civilians. Ray looked up from his box of personal belongings. Did they tell you what that doctor has been doing to women for 15 years? They told me you've been obsessed with your wife's affair to the point of criminal behavior. Ray, I've known you since you were a rookie. This isn't you. Maybe it is me. Maybe I just never had a reason to show it before. Ray left the precinct knowing he'd probably never return as a cop. But he'd learned something valuable from his suspension hearing. Volkov's complaint had been filed by a high-powered attorney named Richard Brennan, who specialized in protecting wealthy clients from frivolous accusations. Ray spent the afternoon researching Brennan's client list. The attorney had represented 3 pharmaceutical executives, two hospital administrators, and a judge who'd been accused of taking bribes. All of his clients had one thing in common. They'd faced serious accusations and emerged with their reputations intact. That evening, Ray met Bobby Chun at a different location, a warehouse in the industrial district where Bobby ran his legitimate security consulting business. "Your doctor friend has been busy," Bobby said, pulling up files on his computer. "Since your visit last night, he's been in contact with some interesting people." Bobby showed Ray phone records and email logs. "He's hired round-the-clock security, changed all his passwords, and moved his most sensitive files to an offshore server. He's also been in contact with 3 other men who have similar profiles." "What kind of profiles?" "Wealthy, powerful, untouchable, and all with histories of accusations they've managed to suppress. I think your doctor is part of something bigger." Ray studied the information. The 3 men Volkov had contacted were Judge Harold Winters, City Councilman Philip Brennan, Richard Brennan's brother, and Hospital Board Chairman Dr. Marcus Webb. "They're covering for each other," Ray realized. "A network of mutual protection. That's my assessment. They share resources, attorneys, even fixers when problems arise. Your doctor isn't just another predator. He's part of an organized system." This changed everything. Ray wasn't just fighting one man anymore. He was up against an entire network of corrupt officials. "There's something else," Bobby said. "I found Volkov's video collection." Bobby pulled up an encrypted drive with dozens of folders, each labeled with initials and dates. Ray recognized several sets of initials from Volkov's notebook. "He's been recording everything for years," Bobby continued. "Not just the women he's abused, but conversations with his protection network. Insurance against insurance." Ray studied the files. "Can you access them?" "Some of them." "But Ray, what I found, it's worse than we thought." Bobby opened one of the files. The video showed Volkov in his office with a young woman Ray didn't recognize. The woman was clearly distressed, and Volkov was calmly explaining that her surgical residency would be terminated unless she reconsidered her position on their relationship. "This is Dr. Sarah Kim," Bobby said. "Patricia Kim's younger sister. She was a surgical resident at Mercy General 2 years ago." Ray watched in disgust as Volkov systematically destroyed the young woman's career prospects while offering her a way out through sexual compliance. "What happened to her?" "She left the program. Moved back to California. Never finished her residency." Bobby showed Ray more files. Dozens of women, all young, all vulnerable, all systematically manipulated and abused by Volkov and his network. "This isn't just about power," Ray said. "This is organized predation. And they've been getting away with it for years because they protect each other." Judge Winters dismisses complaints. Councilman Brennan uses his influence to suppress investigations. Dr. Webb controls hospital disciplinary actions, and Volkov provides leverage through his recordings. Ray felt something cold and deadly settle in his chest. This wasn't just about Linda anymore, or even about Emma. This was about a system of abuse that had destroyed dozens of lives. "I want all of it," Ray said. "Every file, every recording, every piece of evidence." "Ray, some of this stuff, if it gets out the wrong way, it could destroy innocent people. The victims didn't consent to being recorded. Then we make sure it gets out the right way." Ray's phone buzzed with a text message from Linda. "Tim knows I was wearing a wire. He's coming to the safe house. Please help me." Ray cursed and grabbed his backup weapon from Bobby's gun safe. "I have to go. Can you handle the tech side?" "Already on it." "But Ray, be careful. If Volkov's network thinks you're a real threat, they'll escalate beyond legal harassment." Ray was already heading for the door. "Let them escalate. I'm done playing defense." Ray arrived at the safe house to find Linda's car gone and the front door standing open. Inside, the apartment had been ransacked. Furniture was overturned, drawers had been pulled out, and Linda's suitcase was missing. Ray found a note on the kitchen counter, written in precise handwriting. "Detective Hutchinson, your wife is safe and comfortable. If you want her to remain that way, you'll cease your harassment of Dr. Volkov immediately. Further interference will result in consequences you cannot imagine. A friend." Ray called Linda's cell phone. It went straight to voicemail. He was studying the note when his own phone rang. Unknown number. "Detective Hutchinson?" The voice was cultured, authoritative. "This is Judge Harold Winters. I believe we need to have a conversation. Where is my wife? Mrs. Hutchinson is perfectly safe. However, Her continued safety depends on your willingness to be reasonable. What do you want? I want you to stop this crusade against Dr. Volkov. The man is a respected surgeon who's being harassed by a grieving widower who's lost perspective. Ray felt his control slipping. He's a predator who's been abusing women for years. He's a man who's been falsely accused by unstable individuals seeking attention or financial gain. I've seen the evidence, Detective. Dr. Volkov is the victim here. Then why did you kidnap my wife? Mrs. Hutchinson came to us voluntarily, seeking protection from your increasingly erratic behavior. She's concerned for her safety. Ray knew it was a lie, but he also knew he was trapped. Without police resources, without backup, without legal standing, he was fighting a war he couldn't win through conventional means. What do you want from me? Publicly apologize to Dr. Volkov. Admit that your grief led you to make false accusations. Sign a statement acknowledging that your investigation was motivated by personal vendetta rather than legitimate concerns. And if I refuse, then Mrs. Hutchinson's safety becomes uncertain, and your own legal troubles will multiply exponentially. We have evidence of your breaking and entering, your abuse of police databases, your threats against Dr. Volkov. You could face federal charges for civil rights violations. Ray realized he was checkmated. Volkov's network had Linda, they had evidence against him, and they had the legal and political connections to destroy him completely. But Ray had learned something important from 23 years of police work. Sometimes you had to lose a battle to win a war. I need time to think, Ray said. You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, our patience expires. The line went dead. Ray sat in the ransacked safe house, surrounded by evidence of his failure to protect the people he cared about. First Emma, now Linda. Despite everything Linda had done, she was still his responsibility. But as Ray looked around the destroyed apartment, he noticed something Judge Winters and his network had missed. Linda's phone charger was still plugged into the wall outlet, and her backup phone, an old device she kept for emergencies, was tucked behind the microwave. Ray powered on the phone and found a text message Linda had sent to herself just before she disappeared. Warehouse District. Web Industries Building. 3rd floor. They think I came willingly, but I didn't. Ray, I'm sorry for everything. Make them pay. Ray smiled grimly. Linda might have betrayed their marriage, but she was still a survivor. And she'd just given him exactly what he needed to turn the tables. Chapter 6. The Network Exposed. Ray studied the Web Industries building from across the street. It was a converted warehouse in the industrial district, the kind of place where screams wouldn't be heard and bodies could disappear without questions. Dr. Marcus Webb, the hospital board chairman, apparently used it for more than legitimate business. Through his binoculars, Ray counted at least 4 security guards patrolling the perimeter. Professional muscle, not hospital security. This was serious operation. Ray's phone buzzed with a message from Bobby Chun. Package delivered. Check your email. Ray opened Bobby's encrypted message on his phone. Inside were video files, audio recordings, and documented evidence of the network's activities going back 5 years. Bobby had broken Volkov's security and downloaded everything. But more importantly, Bobby had also hacked the building's security system. Ray now had access to internal cameras, electronic locks, and the building's fire suppression system. Time to end this, Ray muttered. Ray circled the building, identifying entry points and escape routes. The network might have Linda, but they'd made a critical error. They'd brought her to their central operations hub, where all their secrets were stored. At 11:30 p.m., 30 minutes before Judge Winters' deadline, Ray put his plan into motion. First, he triggered the building's fire alarm system. Emergency lights began flashing, and a computerized voice announced an evacuation. Ray watched through the security cameras as guards scrambled to respond to what they assumed was a false alarm. While they were distracted, Ray entered through a service entrance Bobby had unlocked remotely. The building's layout matched the blueprints Bobby had provided. Offices on the 1st floor, meeting rooms on the 2nd, and private suites on the 3rd. Ray took the stairs, moving quietly toward the 3rd floor. Through his earpiece, Bobby provided real-time updates on guard positions. 2 guards heading to the 1st floor to check the alarm, Bobby whispered. 1 guard remaining on 3rd floor, southeast corner. Ray found the remaining guard and dealt with him efficiently. A sleeper hold that left the man unconscious but alive. Ray wasn't a killer, despite what his enemies might deserve. The 3rd floor was divided into several luxury suites, each equipped with hidden cameras and recording equipment. This wasn't just a meeting place. It was a sophisticated blackmail operation. Ray found Linda in the largest suite, tied to a chair but otherwise unharmed. She looked up when he entered, relief flooding her face. "Ray? Thank God. I thought. Are you hurt?" Ray cut her bonds with his tactical knife. "No. But Ray, this is bigger than we thought. They've been recording everything here for years. Judges, politicians, business leaders. They have blackmail material on half the city." Ray helped Linda to her feet. "We know. We're going to expose all of it. We need to get out of here. They're planning something terrible for tomorrow." "What kind of something?" "They're going to make it look like you kidnapped me. Then they're going to kill us both and claim it was a murder-suicide." A grieving widower who finally snapped. Ray felt cold fury wash over him. These men weren't just predators. They were planning to murder him and Linda to protect their network. "Change of plans," Ray said. "We're not running anymore." Ray led Linda to the building's central security office, where banks of monitors showed feeds from dozens of hidden cameras throughout the city. The network's surveillance operation was massive. They had compromising material on hundreds of people. "Bobby, are you getting this?" Ray spoke into his earpiece. "Holy shit, Ray. This is huge. They've been recording judges, city council members, state legislators. This network goes all the way to the governor's office." Ray began downloading files while Linda kept watch. They had maybe 10 minutes before the guards realized the fire alarm was a diversion. "Ray," Linda said suddenly. "Someone's coming." Ray looked at the monitor showing the third-floor hallway. Dr. Volkov was stepping out of the elevator, flanked by two men Ray didn't recognize. Professional killers, by the look of them. "Shit. Bobby, we need extraction now." "Working on it." "But Ray, you need to see this." Bobby's voice came through the earpiece with barely controlled excitement. "I found something in Volkov's personal files. The playground equipment that killed Emma. It wasn't a manufacturing defect." Ray's blood went cold. "What?" "Volkov had the equipment sabotaged. He paid a maintenance worker to weaken the chain links. He wanted to traumatize Linda, make her more emotionally dependent on him." Ray stared at the computer screen, unable to process what he was hearing. "You're saying he murdered my daughter?" The maintenance worker kept receipts, photos, everything. Volkov paid him $5,000 to create a tragic accident that would give him complete psychological control over Linda. Ray felt something inside him break. Not grief this time, but pure, crystalline rage. Volkov hadn't just been manipulating Linda. He'd murdered Emma to do it. Linda was crying behind him. "Ray, I didn't know. I swear I didn't know." Ray turned to look at her. For the first time since Emma's death, he saw his wife clearly, not as a betrayer, but as another victim of Volkov's systematic manipulation. "I know," he said quietly. "He played us both." Ray's earpiece crackled with Bobby's voice. "Ray, they're moving up the stairs. You've got maybe 2 minutes." Ray looked around the security office, then at the monitors showing the network's vast surveillance operation. These men had destroyed countless lives, murdered his daughter, and were planning to kill him and Linda. "Bobby, can you trigger the building's sprinkler system?" "Yeah, but that'll destroy the computer equipment. We'll lose the evidence." "Do it anyway. But first, upload everything to every news outlet in the city. Local TV, newspapers, the FBI's public corruption unit. Dump all of it. Ray, that's going to destroy a lot of innocent people along with the guilty ones." Ray looked at Linda, then at the monitors showing years of systematic abuse and corruption. Some things are worth the collateral damage. Bobby began the upload while Ray prepared for what was coming. He had his backup weapon, 15 rounds of ammunition, and the tactical advantages of knowing the building's layout. More importantly, he had nothing left to lose. The sprinkler system activated just as Volkov and his men reached the 3rd floor. Water began cascading from the ceiling, destroying equipment and creating chaos. Through the security monitors, Ray watched Volkov's face contort with rage as he realized his entire operation was being exposed in real time. "Hutchinson." Volkov's voice echoed through the building. "You've destroyed everything." Ray picked up the security office microphone, broadcasting his voice throughout the building. "That was the point, Doctor. You killed my daughter to manipulate my wife. You've destroyed dozens of women's lives. You and your network have corrupted an entire city. But it ends tonight." Ray could see Volkov on the monitors, directing his men to search every room. "You can't win this, Detective," Volkov shouted back. "Even without the evidence, We have the connections to bury you and your wife. No one will believe your word against ours. They don't have to believe me, Ray replied. They just have to watch the videos. Ray switched the building's public address system to broadcast live feeds from Bobby's data dump. Throughout the building, monitors began showing Volkov's recordings of his victims, Judge Winters taking bribes, Councilman Brennan arranging cover-ups. Ray watched Volkov's face on the security monitor as the man realized his entire world was collapsing in real time. You want to know the difference between you and me, Doctor? Ray said into the microphone. You thought you were untouchable. But I learned something from 23 years as a cop. Everyone pays eventually. Ray grabbed Linda's hand. Time to go. They moved through the flooding building as Volkov's men searched frantically. But Ray had one more surprise waiting. In the basement, Ray had planted an explosive device, not enough to bring down the building, but enough to destroy any remaining evidence Volkov might try to salvage. As Ray and Linda escaped through the service entrance, the explosion lit up the night sky behind them. By morning, every news outlet in the city was broadcasting the network's crimes. The FBI had opened a federal investigation. Judge Winters had been arrested. Councilman Brennan was in custody. And Dr. Timothy Volkov was nowhere to be found. Chapter 7. The Reckoning. Ray and Linda watched the news coverage from a motel room across town. Every major network was running the story. Corruption network exposed. City officials arrested in sex scandal. Doctor vanishes amid abuse allegations. The evidence Bobby had released was devastating. Years of systematic abuse, corruption, and blackmail were laid bare for the world to see. Ray felt a grim satisfaction watching powerful men led away in handcuffs. But his primary emotion was emptiness. Emma was still dead. Linda had still betrayed him. And somewhere, Volkov was still free. The FBI wants to interview us, Linda said, hanging up her phone. Good. Let them have everything we know. Linda sat on the bed beside Ray. For the first time in months, they were truly talking. Not fighting, not manipulating, just two broken people trying to make sense of what had happened to their lives. Ray, about Emma. I need you to know I never intended for any of this to happen. Ray nodded. I know. Volkov played us both. He saw our weaknesses and exploited them. What happens now? Between us. Ray was quiet for a long moment. I don't know. Too much has happened. Too much damage. I understand. But Ray, I want to help you find him. Volkov. He needs to pay for what he did to Emma. Ray looked at his wife, really looked at her, for the first time since the affair was revealed. She was still beautiful, but there was something broken in her eyes now. Volkov had damaged her as much as he'd damaged Ray. We'll find him, Ray said quietly. But after that, we're done. The marriage is over. Linda nodded, tears streaming down her face. I know. I'm sorry for everything. The FBI interview took place that afternoon. Agent Sarah Mitchell was a veteran investigator specializing in public corruption. She was thorough, professional, and clearly impressed by the scope of evidence Ray and Bobby had uncovered. This is the largest corruption case we've seen in years, Mitchell told Ray. Judge Winters was taking bribes. Councilman Brennan was fixing investigations. Dr. Webb was facilitating abuse at the hospital. The whole network is crumbling. What about Volkov? He's in the wind. We've frozen his assets, but he had offshore accounts and multiple passports. He could be anywhere. Ray felt frustration building. After everything they'd exposed, Volkov might still escape justice. However, Mitchell continued, we did find something interesting in his apartment. She showed Ray a photograph of a leather-bound journal, different from the notebook Ray had found in Volkov's office. This appears to be a personal diary going back 10 years. It documents not just his abuse of women, but his escalating need for control and dominance. The entry about your daughter is particularly disturbing. Mitchell opened the journal to a marked page. Ray read Volkov's handwriting. LH becoming too independent. Need major traumatic event to regain control. Playground equipment provides perfect opportunity. Maintenance worker M. Rodriguez amenable to financial incentive. Tragic accident will bond LH to me permanently through shared grief and guilt. Ray's hands shook as he read the clinical description of his daughter's murder. Rodriguez has been arrested, Mitchell said. He's cooperating fully in exchange for a plea deal. We have documentation of Volkov's payment, photographs of the sabotaged equipment, even text messages between them. Is it enough to convict him? If we find him, yes. But Ray, I need to ask you something. We know Volkov escaped during the warehouse explosion. Do you have any idea where he might go? Ray had been thinking about that question for hours. Volkov was intelligent, resourceful, and had been planning escape routes for years. But he was also narcissistic and compulsive. He won't go far, Ray said finally. His entire identity is built around being the brilliant surgeon, the charming manipulator. He'll want to restart his operation somewhere else, but he'll need familiar ground. What do you mean? He's got properties we haven't found yet. Safe houses, backup identities. But more than that, he's got victims who are still under his control. Women who are too frightened or traumatized to come forward. Ray thought about Patricia Kim's sister, Sarah, who had left medical school and moved to California. About the dozens of other women in Volkov's files. He'll try to contact them, Ray continued. He'll want to make sure they stay quiet, especially now that his network is exposed. He can't resist trying to maintain control. Mitchell nodded. We're monitoring communications to all known victims. If Volkov tries to contact any of them, we'll be ready. But Ray wasn't willing to wait for Volkov to make a mistake. That night, he called Bobby Chun. I need one more favor, Ray said. Ray, you've already burned down half the city's power structure. What more could you possibly want? I want to find Volkov before the FBI does. Why? Ray thought about Emma swinging at the playground, laughing and asking her daddy to push her higher. He thought about the chain snapping, about his daughter's final moments of terror and confusion. Because the legal system will give him life in prison. I want to give him something else. Bobby was quiet for a moment. Ray, I've helped you expose corruption and bring down criminals. But I won't be part of murder. I'm not talking about murder. I'm talking about justice. What's the difference? Ray didn't answer directly. Can you track him or not? Maybe. But Ray, if you're planning what I think you're planning, you need to consider the consequences. You've already lost your career, your marriage. Don't lose your soul too. My soul was forfeit the moment that bastard murdered my daughter. Bobby sighed. I'll see what I can find. 2 days later, Bobby called with information. He's in Miami. Using the identity Dr. Thomas Volker, close enough to his real name that he won't slip up, different enough to avoid immediate detection. Where exactly? Private medical clinic in Coral Gables. Upscale clientele, minimal oversight. He's positioning himself as a pediatric consultant specializing in difficult cases. Ray felt sick. Even in hiding, Volkov was finding ways to access vulnerable children and their families. Bobby, I need you to do something else. Contact Dr. Sarah Kim in California. Tell her we found her sister's abuser and we need her help. Ray, tell her we need someone to get close to him. Someone he won't suspect. That evening, Ray received a call from an unknown number. Detective Hutchinson? This is Dr. Sarah Kim. I understand you're looking for the man who destroyed my sister's career. Dr. Kim, I know this is difficult, but I want to help. Patricia told me what you did to expose the network. My sister hasn't been the same since her experience with Volkov. She suffers from anxiety, depression, PTSD. She was going to be a surgeon, detective. She was going to save lives. Dr. Kim, what I'm planning, it's not exactly legal. Neither was what he did to my sister. Neither was murdering your daughter. Sometimes the law isn't enough. Ray smiled grimly. Then let's discuss what justice looks like. The plan they developed was simple but effective. Dr. Sarah Kim would approach Volkov's clinic as a potential colleague, someone looking for a position in pediatric consultation. Her credentials were impeccable, her story believable. More importantly, she looked enough like her sister that Volkov's compulsions would override his caution. Ray flew to Miami the next day, using a fake identity Bobby had provided. He checked into a hotel near Volkov's clinic and began surveillance. After 3 days of watching, Ray had mapped Volkov's new routine. The man was already establishing patterns: expensive restaurants, exclusive clubs, a luxury apartment in South Beach. But more disturbing, Ray observed Volkov meeting with several young women who appeared to be medical students or residents. The predator was already rebuilding his operation. On the 4th day, Dr. Sarah Kim arrived in Miami. Chapter 8. The Trap Closes. Dr. Sarah Kim was everything Volkov couldn't resist: brilliant, beautiful, and vulnerable. She presented herself as a pediatric resident looking for specialized training, having heard about his innovative approaches to child psychology through medical journals. Ray watched through a telescopic lens as Sarah entered Volkov's clinic for her interview. She wore a wire provided by Bobby Chun, allowing Ray to monitor the conversation from his surveillance position across the street. Dr. Kim. Volkov's voice came through Ray's earpiece, smooth and confident. Your credentials are impressive. Johns Hopkins, pediatric residency at Children's Hospital of Philadelphia. What brings you to my humble practice? I'm looking for specialized training in pediatric trauma cases, Sarah replied. I understand you have unique insights into helping children process difficult experiences. Ray gritted his teeth. Even in his new identity, Volkov couldn't resist the irony of positioning himself as someone who helped traumatized children. Indeed I do. But my methods are unconventional. Not everyone is suited for this type of work. I'm very dedicated to learning, Dr. Volker. I'm willing to do whatever it takes. The conversation continued for 20 minutes, with Volkov clearly becoming more interested. Sarah played her role perfectly. Eager, slightly naive, but qualified enough to be useful. I'd like to offer you a position, Volkov said finally. But I should warn you, the work can be intense. I require complete discretion from my associates. What we do here stays here. Of course, I understand the sensitive nature of treating traumatized children. Excellent. Can you start Monday? I have several cases that could benefit from a fresh perspective. After Sarah left the clinic, she met Ray at a coffee shop 6 blocks away. He took the bait, she said, removing the small recording device from her collar. But Ray, listening to him talk about treating traumatized children, it made my skin crawl. What's your assessment of his mental state? He's completely convinced he's the victim in all this. He spent 10 minutes complaining about being persecuted by vindictive accusers and how the medical establishment failed to protect talented physicians from false allegations. Ray wasn't surprised. Narcissists like Volkov never accepted responsibility for their actions. Did he seem suspicious of you? No, but he's definitely more paranoid than before. The clinic has security cameras everywhere, and he mentioned having protection from people who want to cause him trouble. Protection? Hired security. At least 2 men, possibly more. This isn't going to be as simple as we thought. Ray had expected as much. Volkov was wealthy, connected, and desperate. He would have used his resources to ensure his safety in Miami. That evening, Ray conducted reconnaissance on Volkov's apartment building. The man had chosen well, a luxury high-rise with excellent security, limited access points, and clear sight lines to detect surveillance. But Ray had advantages Volkov didn't know about. 23 years of police work had taught him patience, observation, and the ability to think like both predator and prey. More importantly, Ray had something Volkov had never possessed, the moral clarity that came from seeking justice rather than personal gratification. Ray's phone buzzed with a text from Sarah Kim. He wants to meet tomorrow night. Private dinner to discuss my future with the practice. It's starting. Ray typed back. Are you sure you want to go through with this? Once we start, there's no going back. My sister deserves justice. Your daughter deserves justice. All his victims deserve justice. I'm sure. The next evening, Ray positioned himself across the street from the restaurant where Sarah was meeting Volkov. Through his telephoto lens, he could see them at a corner table, Volkov clearly turning on his charm. Ray's earpiece crackled with their conversation. You remind me of someone, Volkov was saying. Another brilliant young doctor I once mentored. She had great potential, but unfortunately couldn't handle the pressures of advanced medical practice. What happened to her? She had to leave the program. Some people simply aren't strong enough for this level of medicine. It requires complete dedication, absolute trust in your supervisor's guidance. Ray could hear the predatory undertones even in Volkov's civilized conversation. The man was already beginning his psychological manipulation. I understand, Sarah replied. I'm prepared to be completely dedicated. I hope so, because my methods of instruction can be intensive. Some might even call them unconventional. Ray watched Volkov lean closer to Sarah, his body language becoming more aggressive. Dr. Volker, could I ask you something personal? Of course. The news reports from the Midwest about corruption in hospitals, doctors abusing their positions, that must have been disturbing for you to watch. Ray held his breath. This was dangerous territory. Volkov's expression darkened. Those reports were grossly exaggerated. A vindictive detective destroyed several good men's careers because he couldn't accept that his wife preferred a more sophisticated companion. Really? The evidence seemed quite comprehensive. Evidence can be manufactured, Dr. Kim, especially when desperate people are willing to lie for attention or money. The real tragedy is how easily the media believed such obvious fabrications. Ray could see Volkov's mask slipping, his narcissistic rage showing through the charming facade. But surely some of the allegations must have been true. Volkov's hand moved to cover Sarah's on the table. My dear, you seem very interested in these unpleasant topics. Perhaps we should discuss more personal matters. Ray's jaw clenched as he watched Volkov begin his standard predatory approach. But Sarah handled it perfectly. I apologize, Dr. Volker. I was just curious because I've heard such wonderful things about your work with trauma patients. It must be rewarding to help people overcome difficult experiences. It is indeed, though some patients require more intensive therapy than others. The dinner continued for another hour, with Volkov becoming increasingly inappropriate. Ray documented everything through photographs and audio recordings. By the end of the evening, they had enough evidence to prove Volkov was already returning to his predatory patterns. But evidence wasn't what Ray wanted anymore. The next morning, Ray received a call that changed everything. Detective Hutchinson? This is Agent Mitchell from the FBI. We've located Volkov in Miami, and we're preparing to arrest him. Ray felt panic surge through him. When? Tomorrow morning. We have enough evidence from his diary and the Rodriguez confession to charge him with your daughter's murder, plus the corruption and abuse charges. Agent Mitchell, I need to ask a favor. What kind of favor? Give me 24 hours before you move in. Detective, I can't do that. Volkov is a flight risk, and we can't take the chance of losing him again. He's not going anywhere. He's too invested in his new operation here. But I need closure before you arrest him. What kind of closure? Ray looked out his hotel window toward Volkov's clinic. The kind that comes from looking a child killer in the eye and telling him exactly what he's lost. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. 12 hours, detective. That's all I can give you. Ray hung up and immediately called Sarah Kim. We need to accelerate the timeline. The FBI is moving tomorrow. What do you need me to do? Tonight. Get him alone. Get him talking about his victims, about Emma, about what he's really done. I want a full confession before they arrest him. Ray, that's extremely dangerous. If he suspects, he won't suspect. His ego won't let him. He thinks he's untouchable, that he's outsmarted everyone. Use that against him. That evening, Sarah called Volkov and told him she'd been thinking about their conversation, that she was ready to commit fully to his intensive training methods. She suggested they meet at his apartment to discuss the details privately. Ray positioned himself in the building across from Volkov's high-rise, using telephoto equipment to monitor the apartment windows. Sarah wore a high-definition camera disguised as a medical alert pendant, giving Ray visual as well as audio access. At 9 p.m., Sarah entered Volkov's penthouse apartment. Ray could see them through the floor-to-ceiling windows, Volkov offering wine, showing off his expensive furnishings, playing the sophisticated host. I'm glad you called tonight, Volkov said as they settled on his leather couch. I had a feeling you were someone who truly understood the demands of excellence. I want to understand everything, Sarah replied. Your methods, your philosophy, your approach to breaking through patients' resistance. Breaking through resistance is indeed crucial. Most people don't realize that healing sometimes requires uncomfortable experiences. Ray watched Volkov move closer to Sarah on the couch. What kind of uncomfortable experiences? Well, take traumatized children, for example. They often build walls to protect themselves from further pain. But those walls also prevent healing. Sometimes a skilled practitioner must dismantle those walls. How do you dismantle them? Volkov smiled, and Ray could see the predator emerging fully. Through carefully applied pressure. Fear, dependency, isolation. When a patient realizes that their comfort, their safety, their future depends entirely on pleasing me, they become remarkably receptive to treatment. Sarah maintained her composure, but Ray could see her tension through the camera feed. That sounds like a very personal approach. It has to be personal. I become the most important person in their lives. More important than family, friends, anyone. They learn that disappointing me has consequences, while pleasing me brings rewards. What kind of consequences? Volkov's hand moved to Sarah's thigh. That depends on the patient. For adults, it might be professional destruction, financial ruin, social isolation. For children, Volkov paused, his smile becoming genuinely disturbing. Children are more fragile. Sometimes a traumatic experience is necessary to establish proper control. Ray's blood went cold. Volkov was essentially admitting to deliberately traumatizing children as part of his treatment. Dr. Volker, are you saying you've intentionally caused trauma to establish control over patients? Not caused, Dr. Kim. Arranged. There's a significant difference. I don't understand. Volkov stood up and walked to his bar, pouring himself a drink. A few years ago, I was treating a particularly difficult case. A young girl whose mother was uncooperative. The mother was married to a police detective, very protective, very suspicious of my methods. Ray realized with horror that Volkov was about to confess to Emma's murder. The child had observed some indiscretions between her mother and myself. She was becoming a liability. So I arranged for a tragic accident that would accomplish several goals simultaneously. What kind of accident? Playground equipment failure. The child died. The mother was consumed with guilt, and the father was too devastated to interfere with my treatment of his wife. It was quite elegant, really. Sarah's voice was barely steady as she asked, "You killed a child to maintain control over her mother?" I eliminated an obstacle and created optimal conditions for therapy. The mother's subsequent guilt and dependency made her infinitely more manageable. Ray had heard enough. More than enough. Volkov had just confessed to murdering Emma, and he'd done it with the casual indifference of someone discussing the weather. Ray left his surveillance position and headed for Volkov's building. He'd promised Agent Mitchell he wouldn't interfere with the arrest, but he'd never promised he wouldn't confront Volkov first. The building's security was sophisticated, but Ray had been studying it for days. He knew the blind spots in their camera coverage, the service entrances that weren't monitored as carefully. More importantly, he knew that security guards were trained to stop intruders, not to stop angry fathers seeking justice for murdered daughters. Ray reached Volkov's floor and moved quietly toward the penthouse. Through his earpiece, he could hear the conversation continuing. "Dr. Kim, you seem troubled by my revelation. I hope you understand that everything I've told you demonstrates the level of commitment required for this work." I understand. I don't think you do. You see, by listening to my confession, you've become part of it. You're now complicit in what some might call murder, though I prefer to think of it as necessary intervention. Ray heard the threat in Volkov's voice and quickened his pace. "Dr. Volker, I think I should leave. I'm afraid that's not possible. You see, you remind me so much of another young doctor I once knew. Patricia Kim. Perhaps you've heard of her?" Ray reached Volkov's door and found it unlocked. Sarah had left it open for him. "Patricia is my sister," Sarah said quietly. "I thought she might be. The resemblance is quite striking." Poor Patricia never understood the opportunities one was offering her. "I hope you'll be more receptive." Ray entered the apartment silently, moving through the foyer toward the living room where Volkov and Sarah were talking. "What kind of opportunities?" Sarah asked, clearly stalling for time. "The same kind I offered your sister. Professional advancement in exchange for personal accommodation. It's a mutually beneficial arrangement. And if I refuse? Well, you've just heard me confess to murder. If you were to refuse my offer and then suffer an unfortunate accident, it would simply appear that you'd gotten too close to a dangerous truth." Ray stepped into the living room, his weapon drawn. "Dr. Timothy Volkov," Ray said quietly. Volkov spun around, his face going white with shock and recognition. "Detective Hutchinson. How unexpected." "Not really. You murdered my daughter. Did you think I'd just let that go?" Volkov's composure returned quickly. "You have no evidence. Whatever this young woman has told you, we recorded everything. Your confession, your threats, your admission that you arranged Emma's death. Recordings obtained illegally are inadmissible in court." Ray smiled coldly. "Who said anything about court?" For the first time, Volkov looked genuinely frightened. "Detective, you're a police officer. You're sworn to uphold the law. I was a police officer. I was also a father. And you took that away from me." Ray gestured for Sarah to move away from Volkov. She complied quickly, positioning herself near the apartment's entrance. "What do you want?" Volkov asked. "I want you to understand what you've lost. You had wealth, position, respect. You could have been remembered as a brilliant surgeon who saved children's lives. Instead, you'll be remembered as a predator who murdered a 6-year-old girl to maintain control over her mother. You can't prove. I don't need to prove anything. By tomorrow morning, every news outlet in the country will have your confession. Your face will be on every television screen. Your name will be synonymous with child murder. Ray could see Volkov's world crumbling as he realized the scope of his exposure. But more than that, Ray continued, I want you to know that Emma won. You thought you could destroy my family, manipulate my wife, escape justice. But my daughter's death brought down your entire network. Judge Winters is in federal prison. Councilman Brennan is facing RICO charges. Dr. Webb has lost everything. That wasn't supposed to happen, Volkov said, his mask finally slipping completely. No, it wasn't. You thought you were smarter than everyone else. But you made one critical mistake. What mistake? Ray's expression hardened. You underestimated how far a father will go to get justice for his murdered child. The apartment door burst open, and FBI agents poured in. Agent Mitchell was at the front, her weapon drawn. Dr. Timothy Volkov, you're under arrest for murder, conspiracy, corruption, and sexual assault. As the agents handcuffed Volkov, he looked back at Ray with pure hatred. This isn't over, detective. Ray watched as they led Volkov away. Yes, it is. Chapter 9, Emma's Peace. 6 months later, Ray sat on a bench in Riverside Park. The playground had been completely rebuilt. New equipment, better safety features, a small memorial plaque where Emma had died. The plaque read, In memory of Emma Hutchinson and all children taken too soon. May their light guide us toward justice. Volkov's trial had been a media sensation. The evidence was overwhelming. His confession, the maintenance worker's testimony, the FBI's documentation of the entire corruption network. He'd been sentenced to life without parole for Emma's murder, plus additional decades for his other crimes. Judge Winters had died in federal prison, apparent suicide, though some suspected his former network associates had silenced him permanently. Councilman Brennan was serving 25 years. Dr. Webb had lost his medical license and was facing multiple civil lawsuits. Ray's phone buzzed with a text message from Agent Mitchell. Volkov's appeal was denied by the Supreme Court. He'll die in prison. Ray typed back. Good. Linda approached from across the park. She'd been in therapy for months, working through the trauma of Volkov's manipulation. They were officially divorced now, but she'd asked to meet him here today. How are you doing? She asked, sitting beside him on the bench. Better. Some days. I got the job in Seattle. Pediatric nursing at Children's Hospital. Ray nodded. Linda was starting over, 3,000 miles away from the memories and corruption that had destroyed their lives in the Midwest. That's good. You'll help a lot of kids. I hope so. I want to do something meaningful with whatever time I have left. They sat in comfortable silence, watching children play on the new playground equipment. Their laughter filled the air, innocent, joyful sounds that Emma would never make again. Do you think she's at peace? Linda asked quietly. Ray looked at the memorial plaque, then at the swings where Emma used to play. Yeah, I think she is. Do you think we'll ever be? Ray considered the question. The rage that had driven him for months was gone, replaced by something quieter but no less permanent. He would never forget Emma's murder, never forgive the system that had enabled it, never stop missing his daughter. But he'd found something like justice. Volkov would never hurt another child. The corruption network was destroyed. The system that had protected predators for decades was exposed and reformed. I think peace isn't about forgetting, Ray said finally. It's about knowing you did everything you could to make things right. Linda nodded, tears in her eyes. I'm sorry, Ray. For everything. I know. Emma knows too. Linda stood to leave, then turned back. Will you visit her grave with me? Before I leave for Seattle? Ray looked at his ex-wife, the woman who'd betrayed him, who'd been manipulated into complicity, who'd lost as much as he had in different ways. Yeah, we can do that. After Linda left, Ray remained on the bench as the sun set over the playground. The park was empty now. The children called home for dinner. But Ray could swear he heard the sound of chains creaking in the evening breeze. Daddy. Ray turned toward Emma's favorite swing. For just a moment, he could see her there, not the terrified child who'd died in pain, but the happy girl who'd laughed and asked her father to push her higher. I got them, Princess, Ray whispered. All of them. The swing moved slightly in the breeze, and Ray felt something he hadn't experienced since Emma's death, peace. Not the peace of forgetting or forgiving, but the peace of justice served and promises kept. Ray stood up from the bench and walked toward his car. Tomorrow he would start over, new career, new city, new life. He'd never be a cop again, But he'd learned something more important than law enforcement. He'd learned that sometimes the system fails, and when it does, good people have to step outside the lines to protect the innocent. Emma was gone, but her death had saved dozens of other children from Volkov's predation. Her memory had brought down a network of corruption that had operated with impunity for years. In the end, a 6-year-old girl had defeated men who thought they were untouchable. As Ray drove away from Riverside Park, he could swear he heard Emma's laughter one last time. Not the sound of a ghost seeking vengeance, but the joy of a child who knew her father had kept his promise. Justice had been served. The guilty had paid. And somewhere beyond the darkness of grief and rage, Emma Hutchinson was finally at peace. Ray smiled and drove toward his new life, carrying his daughter's memory like a light in the darkness, not as a burden of guilt or grief, but as a reminder that love endures beyond death, and that fathers will cross any line to protect their children, even when those children are already gone. Epilogue. 2 years later, Dr. Sarah Kim graduated from her pediatric residency and opened a clinic specializing in treating children who'd been abused by medical professionals. The clinic was funded by settlements from civil lawsuits against Volkov's network. Patricia Kim completed her medical degree and joined her sister's practice, finally achieving her dream of becoming a surgeon. Ray Hutchinson became a private investigator specializing in exposing institutional corruption. His first case involved a prep school where faculty had been abusing students for decades. His methods were thorough, relentless, and completely legal. Mostly legal. Linda Hutchinson spent her remaining years helping sick children in Seattle, never remarrying, carrying the guilt of her choices, but finding redemption in service to others. And in Riverside Park, on quiet evenings when the wind was just right, people occasionally reported hearing the sound of a child's laughter coming from the memorial playground, not haunting or sorrowful, but joyful and free. Emma Hutchinson's legacy lived on, not in the darkness of her murder, but in the light of the justice that followed. Sometimes the innocent die, but sometimes their deaths change everything.